another. Sometimes, one direction is going the same as the cars and the other direction, so that you have narrower lanes, but bicycles still have their separate lanes. Sometimes they were alongside the cars, which was a little nerve-wracking, but I never felt threatened. It's just sometimes, you hear a big truck and you think, oh my gosh, but, they make sure to give you room.
Did you take your bike or did you rent one there?
No, I took my bike. So,
Is that one of those foldables?
yeah, it's a Bike Friday.
Oh.
And it goes in a suitcase. Some disassembly and reassembly required, but yeah. But I had front and rear rack and camping equipment, and
Oh, wow. Okay, you're doing the whole thing. Okay.
yeah, I did a mix of camping and like some hostels, and in some cases staying with people either that I knew or that were friends of friends, or warm showers or things like that. So
I have a friend currently who's riding from New York to SF.
from New York, where?
To San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he hits, I think, does 100 miles a day or something, and then
Oh, no, I don't do that kind of distance. I'm old. I get to, The other thing that was interesting was that, everyone says, oh, well, Denmark is so flat. No, it's not. Not only that, but the main area, the peninsula, Jylland, or in English, Jutland. I used to live in Denmark, so it's hilly and the winds were crazy. I mean, to the point where there was one section where it just got to the point where I was actually feeling physically ill from the effort, and I got off in a town and caught a train. Not that far. Maybe.
All right, it's 6:30 and we already have a
Yeah.
pretty lengthy
Okay,
list
we're
of
ready to roll?
participants.
No
Yeah,
worries.
Casey, welcome. You're muted, so unmute yourself.
I'm gonna.
So you wanna introduce Casey?
Sure. So thanks everyone for joining. Sean, are we good on the recording and all that, or anything we need? Okay, great. So we are getting an update on the Cortellia Road / Coney Island Avenue intersection redesign. I believe Casey Gorel from the Department of Transportation is going to be presenting to us about this, give us a little update. Take it away, Casey. After Casey presents, we will obviously pepper him with questions. And I see there are some other folks who've joined the call. So questions can kind of be distributed. So Casey, take it away.
One second. Sean, it says not in meeting 10. Are those people who said they're coming? What is that?
That's just a WebEx update. It just lists the people who just haven't signed in yet or haven't joined yet.
Okay, that's okay. Very good.
Yeah, it's a weird glitch with WebEx that nobody can figure out how to fix, but we're working on it.
Okay,
Disregard.
Sure. Disregard. Casey, go ahead. Thank you for coming.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to share presentation. Okay. I haven't used WebEx in a while, so I have to learn everything again. Okay.
Let's put it this way. The screen is now entirely white.
Oh, it's white.
I can see your presentation.
Well,
working for me too.
Advanced.
Okay, there you go. Casey, okay. First, tell us who you are in relation to DOT.
Yes. So good evening, everyone. My name is Casey Grell. I'm from New York City Department of Transportation. And tonight I'm going to be giving an update presentation for our proposal for improvements at Coney Island Avenue and Cortellia Road. So an outline of the presentation, we're going to go over an overview of the location, which I'm sure everyone here is very aware of, a summary of the past work, existing conditions and issues that we've identified, as well as the community has identified, our proposal, and then our proposed next steps. So the location. So the project we're looking at is at the complex intersection of Coney Island Avenue and Cortellia Road. This intersection is what we call a dogleg intersection because it's misaligned and doesn't have a straight through movement for Cortellia Road. And this results in a lot of complicated movements and signal timing at the intersection. Both corridors of Cortellia Road and Coney Island Avenue are commercial corridors. The B68 runs north and south on Coney Island Avenue, and the B103, BM1, 2, 3, and 4 express buses run on Cortellia Road and then turn onto Coney Island Avenue north of the intersection to head either into Manhattan or downtown Brooklyn. Past work. So in 2018, DOT completed an in-house safety project where we added the middle crosswalk and pedestrian island. This was done to accommodate people who are walking in the middle of the intersection for direct access to the Q train station at Cortellia Road. The entrance is on the south side of Cortellia Road, which means a lot of people want direct access to that south sidewalk on the eastern side of Coney Island Avenue. The project also added a leading pedestrian interval, which is a pedestrian head start for pedestrians crossing Cortellia Road, as well as a flashing yellow left turn arrow. And this was done to prevent vehicles who were jumping the red. This was something that came up from a community complaint, where cars would actually turn really quickly to make the left turn onto Cortellia Road in advance of opposing traffic on Coney Island Avenue, which often resulted in conflicting with pedestrians at high speed. We do before-after safety data for all of our projects, and in the 3 years after the project was installed in 2018, crashes with injuries were reduced 30% and pedestrian injuries were reduced 40%. It is worth noting that this only takes into account crashes with injuries. It does not really indicate any comfortability or perceived safety issues. So these are only issues where a collision occurred, not necessarily where there are near misses. So we definitely do want to acknowledge that there are still concerns about perceived safety issues at the intersection. And there is a general feeling from the community that the intersection is unsafe. We also did before-after pedestrian counts after the crosswalk was installed. Prior to the project, the middle crossing was the second most used crossing in the intersection, even though it wasn't actually marked or present. And after the middle crosswalk increased by 140 to 260% after the crossing was installed. So it's now the most used crossing in the intersection. Some existing conditions. So there's been a large request for further changes at the intersection. There's been 138 requests for improvements since 2018. And that number spiked after the project was installed in 2018 and 2019. And then again in 2023 after a community-led organizing effort. There were posters posted at the intersection with the commissioner's correspondence email. And most of those complaints have come from private citizens. Pedestrian issues were about 50% of the complaints, with the majority of the complaints around pedestrians and vehicles going at the same time across Coney Island Avenue. Adding left turn arrows and general safety were also identified frequently. Other requests included turn bans, right turn only arrows, crosswalk removals, congestion mitigation, and double parking enforcement. So the project area, this is the intersection of Coney Island and Cortellia. The most notable thing about this intersection is the non-standard movements. So the through movements cross multiple crosswalks on Cortellia Road. So if you're going through Cortellia, you actually go through 3 crosswalks. By design, the through movements are designed to function as a left turn with vehicles yielding in the crosswalk and then a right turn. But the non-standard operations does lead to a lot of confusion and aggressive turns by drivers. This puts people in conflict with pedestrians and vehicles due to this complex movement. And the middle crosswalk proceeds at the same time as this turn. Many vehicles do not fully yield to pedestrians who do have the right of way. And pedestrians at the intersection have no dedicated crossing time in the signal phasing. All crossing time is shared with turning vehicles. We also have noted that a lot of drivers turn left and stop prior to the crosswalk, even when there's no pedestrian crossing. And there's a recently installed signal on the north side of the intersection that has increased the amount of stopping in the intersection, which really just increases the amount of confusion, congestion, honking, and aggressive behavior as people try to go around stop vehicles. Another issue at the intersection is the difficult left turns. Due to the heavy through volumes on Coney Island Avenue, left turns to Cortellia Road are very difficult. And this difficult left turn was a driving factor for the MTA to consider moving buses off of Cortelia Road onto Beverly Road as part of the network redesign. Many left turn vehicles essentially turn on the red at the end of the signal phase or during the pedestrian LPI, ignoring the red turn arrow. We've collected data for the intersection. This data was collected in 2023, and it's important to note that about 1/3 of people in the intersection are crossing the street and are pedestrians. 2/3 of the people using the intersection are in vehicles. And the primary movement is north and south on Coney Island Avenue by vehicles. The next biggest user of the intersection are people crossing Coney Island Avenue, about 1/4 of the people in the intersection. So just something to note as we go forward in the presentation. So the project proposal, DOT explored 3 scenarios for improvements and presented those scenarios to the community in the fall of 2023. Those scenarios included adding protected left turns, adding an all pedestrian phase, or making minor markings and signage improvements. At that meeting, the community spoke mostly in favor of the all pedestrian phase scenario. Just recapping 2 of the scenarios. So for the protected left turns, that would alleviate the left turn issue. However, it would cause severe delays to through traffic on Coney Island Avenue. And it was expected that the queue spillback of vehicles waiting for through traffic would actually block access to the left turn lane, which would negate the protected left turn phase. We also estimate that this would negatively affect bus speeds by holding back through traffic on Coney Island Avenue. And it does not solve or improve any of the pedestrian issues at the intersection. The other scenario we looked at was minor markings and signage improvements. This does not solve the left turn issue, it does not improve bus operation, and it does not solve pedestrian issues at the intersection. So for those reasons, DOT determined that these options would be unfeasible or undesirable. The preferred scenario that was presented to the community was the all pedestrian phase. This scenario would add an all pedestrian phase or a Barnes dance to create conflict-free crossings in the intersection. It would add a long protected left turn phase for left turns on Coney Island Avenue to Cortelia Road without impacting through traffic. However, it does require all traffic on Cortelia Road to turn right at Coney Island Avenue. And this allows for the consolidation of both signal phases for Cortelia Road as there are no turn conflicts. So how would this scenario work? To allow for the new all pedestrian phase, both Cortelia Road signal phases must be consolidated. There is not ample time in the signal phasing to create new phases. This requires all traffic on Cortelia Road approaching Coney Island Avenue to turn right. The left and through movements would be banned. The turn restrictions would be reinforced with markings and signage. And FDNY operations would be maintained, and emergency vehicles would still be able to make all turns with sirens and lights activated. So physical changes at the intersection, we would add right turn only markings for both approaches of Cortelia Road approaching Coney Island Avenue. We would lengthen the median markings on Coney Island Avenue to reinforce these turn bans. And we would lengthen the left turn bay for southbound Coney Island Avenue to accommodate the new protected left turn phase. This allows us to make substantial changes to the signal timing. So the traffic diversions allow for consolidating the 2 Cortelia Road phases into one phase. On the existing conditions diagram that's shown with the last 2 phases, the 30-second phase for eastbound Cortelia Road and the 34-second phase for westbound Cortelia Road. The Coney Island Avenue left turn phase that's being added could be paired with the protected right turns on Cortelia Road, allowing for a very long period of left turns to have the signal. So that's shown under the proposed condition on the second diagram with the 30-second left turn Coney Island Avenue phase paired with right turns for Cortelia Road. Freeing up this signal timing allows for a new all pedestrian phase, which would allow for conflict-free crossings and all crosswalks in the intersection, which gives 31% of the intersection users, which are pedestrians, 29% of the signal timing as exclusive use. So who is affected by these changes? The diversions would worsen operations for about 9% of the intersection users, those who make the left and through movements on Cortelia Road, and they would have to find alternative routes. The left turn phase would improve operations for 7% of intersection users, those who are turning left from Coney Island Avenue to Cortelia Road. The all pedestrian phase would improve operations for 31% of users by creating conflict-free crossings for pedestrians, and the remaining 53% of users would see limited improvements or no changes to operations. We did extensive analysis to determine where would vehicles go. So we looked at both eastbound and westbound Cortellia Road diversions. So shown here is the eastbound Cortellia Road diversion. These diversions are estimated. We can't do an entire borough-wide analysis to determine exactly where cars will go, but this is our best estimate as part of this analysis. For through traffic that's going from Ocean Parkway towards Ocean Avenue, we expect people to use either Avenue C or Ditmas Avenue. This volume is about 95 vehicles in the peak hour, or 4 cars per signal cycle, which is a relatively low volume for standard movements throughout the city. For the eastbound left turning volume, we expect those vehicles to use Avenue C or Ditmas Avenue to access Coney Island Avenue. And that's about 30 vehicles in the peak hour, or 1 car per signal cycle. In the opposite direction, looking at through traffic from heading towards Ocean Parkway, we expect those drivers to use Avenue C or Dorchester Road and Ditmas Avenue. And for westbound left turning vehicles heading south, could use Dorchester Road to access Coney Island Avenue. And those are also about 95 vehicles and 30 vehicles in the peak hour, respectively. There is an expectation that people will not make the turn onto Westminster Road and then to Dorchester. Some people who are coming from Flatbush may use Dorchester all the way. They may use other streets such as Foster or continue north to Beverly Road. So this is essentially a worst case scenario if everyone turns at the last available turn when making their diversion. We studied additional changes that are needed to accommodate these diversions. So for the westbound through traffic that's diverted to Avenue C, we are proposing adding a protected left turn arrow at Coney Island Avenue and Avenue C for northbound left turns due to this increased turn volume. We are also proposing an additional right turn lane for westbound Avenue C approaching Ocean Parkway, which would be repurposed for parking spots. That's to ensure we have adequate processing for people who are making this diverted turn. When looking at the eastbound and westbound traffic diversions, we're looking at additional improvements at Dorchester Road and at Ditmas Avenue. So this proposal would install a pedestrian refuge island at the existing southern crosswalk at Dorchester Road on the south side. We would install a new crosswalk and refuge island on the northern side of Ditmas Avenue, which currently does not have a crosswalk. And we would remove the southbound right turn arrow phase to add this north crosswalk at Ditmas Avenue. And this is to ensure pedestrian safety with the added volume that we expect to be making these movements. The final additional change we're looking to implement is for the eastbound left turn who would use Avenue C. We would install a new crosswalk and refuge island on the north side of Avenue C and Coney Island Avenue, and also add the northbound protected left turn phase, which I previously shown in another slide. So in summary, this proposal would add an all pedestrian phase and left turn arrows at Coney Island Avenue and Cortellia Road. It would ban the through and left turns for Cortellia Road at Coney Island Avenue. We would use markings and signage to reinforce these turn bans. We'd install new crosswalks and pedestrian refuge islands at Avenue C and Ditmas Avenue. We'd install a new island at Dorchester Road and install a new travel lane approaching Ocean Parkway at Avenue C. The project benefits, we believe this project would improve operations for a large percentage of users, approximately 38% of current intersection users. It would alleviate the left turn issue. It would alleviate pedestrian safety concerns by creating conflict-free crossings. It would improve bus operations by adding left turn phases and protected right turn phases for the buses making the southbound left and the westbound right. And it would maintain emergency access for the nearby firehouse on Cortellia Road. And then it would also enhance pedestrian safety at other locations along Coney Island Avenue. For next steps, so we presented in 2023, which led to the 3 scenarios and the selection of the all ped phase. We had a spring 2024 briefing with FDNY. We're now presenting to you in June of 2024. Following this meeting, we would move into final design and final approvals from other DOT units and potentially install the project as soon as summer potentially into late fall of 2024 for final installation. And that is it.
Thank you very much, Casey. Really appreciate the history and the explanation and the detail in which you put into this presentation. I really appreciate it. All right, we are going to move to questions. There are questions or comments. Why don't folks raise your digital hand and then I will call on you. Start with Liz Denise.
Hi, thank you so much for this presentation. I think these are all really badly needed improvements, and they will really help pedestrians and honestly everyone getting around this area. One thing that I've really kind of noticed, though, thinking about this is I know that a lot of people bicycle along Dorchester Road, and it's been a place that DOT has identified as a potential place for a protected bike lane along with Ditmas Avenue that is, really goes along with other they're right nearby streets to Cortellu, also east-west. And, I wonder if, some of the addition, like the remaining conflicts could potentially be between bicyclists and pedestrians and so forth, but also just diverting more traffic to some of those roads that have a little bit quieter in some people's opinions. They kind of freak me out because they're so wide. If there's, a way to get that improved infrastructure DOT's also kind of teased at in the past to this community board. I think that would be a route for improvement. And I was just wondering if you have any information on that. And also just was kind of curious if, I think in general, a lot of the Coney Island Avenue pedestrian dangers and so forth involve very little daylighting along the street, as well as a lot of double parked cars, which makes it even harder to see when a car is approaching, and that is like across the entire avenue. So while these changes at these specific locations are welcome, I wonder if there's any efforts by DOT to look at a more continuous stretch the whole way on Coney Island Avenue to make more pedestrian safety improvements, and if there are any plans for that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think at this time, I'm not aware of any plans for a larger Coney Island Avenue study, at least not for the unit that I work in. And then I'm not also sure about the current status of the bike lane proposals that were presented for CB14. I'm not sure if Leroy from our Borough Commissioner's Office has any additional information on that project.
We can't hear you, Leroy. And maybe that you need to switch your mics that you're using in your settings.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I had to take the headphones off. I don't know any specific projects at this time, but I definitely will be bringing this back to the Borough Commissioner's Office to see what can be done and what projects can be looked at for the future.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Next, I see Ben.
Thanks so much for the great presentation, Casey. I really appreciate it. It's local. It's definitely much improved with the changes, but very excited to see the proposal that you've made. I think it makes a ton of sense, and I think I'm eagerly anticipating these changes getting put into place. Seconded the comments that were just made about daylighting. I think that would help for sure, and yes, agreed that east-west protected bikes would be really great. But as the proposal stands, I think it would be a really huge improvement to the community. So thank you.
All right, next we'll hear from Steve.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you for the presentation. I think the ideas have a lot of potential, and I did want to say that I thought the presentation was very well constructed in terms of having a lot of information and also anticipating follow-up questions and really providing a full a lot of information that it's well appreciated. I guess one question I had, I know you covered changes that would happen at Avenue C. I'm just curious, with this additional pedestrian time, cars backed up, does that mean that the light changes and timing is going to have to change on like Beverly and Ditmas? Like, are there going to have to be more wholesale type modifications on the neighboring blocks in order to avoid traffic buildup? Thank you.
That's a good question. At this time, no, not at Ditmas. Well, there will be some minor changes at Ditmas. Let me go to that slide too. Because we are proposing to remove the southbound right turn arrow, so that is like a timing change. But in general, the like timing progression for Coney Island Avenue is unchanged. And that's mostly as a result because Coney Island Avenue and Cortelli Road is like the worst intersection along the Coney Island Avenue corridor. It has 3 phases. They're really long. Coney Island actually gets the least amount of green time at this intersection for almost the entire corridor. So this will have either no impact on like Coney Island Avenue as a whole, or we'll have minor improvements for this intersection. But we don't expect any timing changes at Beverly or points north or south of Ditmas Avenue as part of this project.
Thank you, Casey. So next we'll go to Josh.
Hey, folks. Casey, thank you so much for this. I just wanted to double down on a comment Liz made earlier about Dorchester Road. The slide that you just had up that shows the potential changes to traffic shows some folks, some increased traffic potentially going down Westminster and going down Dorchester, which is another kind of problematic intersection that is lacking an all-way stop and has like major visibility issues. So I just wanted to kind of raise some concerns that some additional traffic at that particular intersection would need to be, accommodated.
That's a great flag. We can ensure if this project goes in to do after counts at Westminster and Dorchester Road to assess any changes in travel patterns. I do think the expectation is that most of this traffic probably won't do this movement. This is like kind of a worst case scenario. People will probably use Dorchester Road in its entirety because most of this traffic is probably coming from Flatbush. But that is a good flag and something we will be sure to keep an eye on after installation for any possible improvements at that intersection.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So we will we'll hear from Eric next.
Great. Thank you so much, Casey. It's a really wonderful presentation. I really like that you figured out how to increase pedestrian safety and do it in a way that inconvenienced the smallest number of people possible. So it's a really great trade-off there. I also like that it seems that like traffic will flow more smoothly because there's going to be less confusion and less kind of blocking up of the intersection with confused cars, especially how that affects bus traffic. And given that it's an active commercial district, I think putting pedestrians first, there's just not enough place for everyone to park, so pedestrians have to be the priority there. And I think that'll be a big boon for businesses. I guess I'm wondering 2 things. If there's any chance to go further with this, if it's possible to somehow shorten the distances that pedestrians have to cross unprotected, whether that means that there's concrete bump outs or there's bollards that kind of protect them, especially prevent cars from parking in or driving through the intersection where pedestrians often kind of creep out just to see around cars or get a head start on the journey across. So just, I guess that's daylighting or shortening that distance. But then also I have a concern that without a physical barrier in the island, I have a concern that cars will just kind of go for the left turn anyway. And I know that there's concerns about emergency traffic, but like I'm curious what can be done to physically enforce the no left turn rule. Yeah, so those are my concerns.
Great questions. For the first one, for additional pedestrian space, such as curb extensions or concrete improvements, we did take a look at doing concrete work on the corners. However, due to drainage issues, we aren't able to do that in-house, so that would require a capital improvement. But that is something we can consider in the future. We could look at doing painted curb extensions. However, we have found that the small ones don't really work very well because they lack kind of the hardening you need to keep drivers out of them. They're really only very useful when they're a little bit more substantial. In regards to the median and having a physical object blocking the band movements, that is definitely something we've considered, and we are working and have worked with FDNY to kind of come up with a middle ground to kind of see how this works in the interim, and we could potentially explore further hardening in the future while accommodating FDNY. We are proposing, which isn't highlighted in this drawing, some vertical elements on the median to deter vehicles from making the illegal movements. We also do believe that because the turn will have an arrow and will be paired with the heavy left turns, that it will actually be physically impossible to make those movements because there will be cars making the left turn at the same time. So we do think that this will function, but we will continue to monitor and make any adjustments as needed.
Great. And just about the first point, any possibility of putting bollards in just next to the crosswalks to kind of give some people an additional level of not physical safety, but optical, the appearance that they shouldn't drive there or park? I've seen cars park just on the crosswalk.
We don't typically put bollards at every crosswalk. We have a very limited amount of bollards that we install citywide, and they're not typically used at locations such as this. So it's not something we could use as part of our toolkit for this type of location.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Really wonderful presentation and really great work. Thank you.
All right, so next is Jeffrey.
Hi, thank you so much for this. I appreciated the presentation last time around. I think one of the comments I made was, so I live at Avenue C and Coney Island, and I was worried a little bit about the traffic. I'm super happy to hear that you're putting a crosswalk on the north side and pedestrian safety islands. I think, let me know if this is correct. I think that will also have the effect of forcing traffic to slow down as they are making, there's another dog-leg turn from Avenue C onto Slocum. And I'm hoping that this will effectively cause cars to slow down when they make that turn. Is that correct? And then the other thing I would just say, again, is reiterating what people said about Dorchester. It's a little bit of an awkwardly wide street. There are bicycles, there are pedestrians, there's a senior center, there are vehicles. If this is a reason that DOT could consider doing something to narrow the street and address some street calming or add some more stop signs or anything, I think it would be appreciated by a whole lot of users of Dorchester.
Yes, to your first question, we do expect this to heavily calm the turn from Avenue C onto Coney Island. We also do envision that the new southbound protected left turn phase will actually reduce the number of people who are doing that movement, because a lot of people are using Avenue C to Slocum to avoid the Coney Island Avenue Cortelyou intersection. You go to Slocum and then you go south on Westminster to get to Cortelyou Road. So we do think that if people have a good option just to go straight to Coney Island Avenue, that people will avoid making that dogleg movement to Slocum and then down Westminster, and we'll just stay on more of the major vehicular routes instead of going down residential streets. And then to your second point about the bike lanes, that's something we can take back to our bike unit for further consideration as they look at this neighborhood.
Thank you.
All right, so I see a few more hands up. If you've already asked, then I'd ask that you just bring your hand down. But if you obviously still have another question, I'm happy to call on you again. Let's go to Nina next.
Yes. So the question was raised about bollards, and I understand that there can be a number of issues with those, especially in the situation where we do have those buses and other very large vehicles trying to make that maneuver there. But one of the questions that I had would be are raised sidewalks. I'm going back to Cortellu, the Cortellu, Coney Island intersection. Are raised sidewalks a possibility?
Do you mean raised crosswalks?
Raised crosswalks, I'm sorry. Thank you.
So we are limited in raised crosswalks here because we don't install them on bus or truck routes, which
Oh,
at least half of Cortellia Road is and all of Coney Island Avenue is.
understood.
And I don't think Cortellia Road west of Coney Island Avenue is a truck route. But they also, they're somewhat difficult to install due to drainage for us to install in-house outside of a capital project. If we can't move catch basins, it's something we can maybe look at, but it's probably unlikely that this location would meet the criteria for a raised crosswalk, just based
Understood.
off
Thank-
construction impacts.
Yeah, thank you. And drainage is a big concern in our
Yes.
neighborhoods too, so we don't want to jeopardize that. Thank you so much.
Steve, do you have another question?
I'll put my hand down. Sorry.
I'll just jump in with mine. I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. I do have a question. You may not have the answer to this, but I'm still going to ask it anyway because you're in front of us. So we'll see. After a change like this is made, right? So by let's say the end of the fall, this whole thing is done, hopefully. How long before this stuff gets updated on like Google Maps or Apple Maps for people to know, for example, they can't take a left turn there or anything like that?
That is a great question. So when I've implemented a project, what I do is I report it on Google Maps through my personal account. I do think the agency does have a bit more of a relationship now with Google Maps. I have to check on that. I think it's something we have done for other projects. But I do encourage everyone that once these changes are made, you can report an error on Google Maps and make the update. So I do it after every project I install. And I encourage all the community members to do so as well.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. I imagine that there must be some type of way that Google gets access to like the fact that roads are changing just in general anyway, citywide. But all right, as soon as this is down, maybe we'll report it. All right. So
if I can say, we do notify them once we make any changes immediately. We notify them. Now, how fast do they make the changes? Now that's another option, but we do notify them as soon as we make changes like this.
yeah, so it sounds like there's probably some standard time after a project is done where they get a notification and then ideally they implement it within whatever their internal processes are. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Leroy. All right. Before we move on, are there any other last questions? We got to everyone. Oh, Eric, your hand is up. Oh, well, let's do Eric and then we'll do Sean.
Yeah, I guess one concern I have, and maybe it's about how this project will be evaluated for success. I feel like right now, one thing that keeps this intersection safe is that it is so terrifying to enter, either as a pedestrian or as a driver, that I'm kind of curious, like the perverse consequences of making it actually safer is that people will frequent it more. I know that a lot of drivers just avoid it. So I guess like, what do you anticipate how you can communicate about how this place has improved after you make these changes, or any sort of like any concerns that you have about perverse outcomes or surprising outcomes, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think indicators for success would, one, be less community complaints. I think that would be, number one. We receive so many about this intersection that if the community goes silent, that's one indicator for success. Another thing we do is we do monitor safety data. There is a bit of a lag because it takes about a year for the safety data to come through because it has to be filtered through the state and NYPD. So that's one indicator that we also do is we track safety impacts and changes. I think one thing, one concern the agency always has with adding all pedestrian phases is that pedestrian phases do add pedestrian delay because you have to wait longer to cross the street. So that could potentially increase the amount of people who cross illegally or cross against the signal. However, at this location, you already are waiting so long to cross the street because it's already a three-phase signal. It's so complex. So we don't have those concerns at this location because it's really not that much of a change from a pedestrian standpoint. And from a driver standpoint, the vehicular movements that we expect to increase as part of this are protected movements, so they're not in conflict with pedestrians. So at this location, we don't foresee any potential impacts from making it a more desirable place and increasing the amount of people at the intersection.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, sounds like a great plan.
And then Sean, your hand up or was it
Yeah,
up?
thank you. I'm sorry, I was kicked out of this meeting a couple of times. I've had some connectivity issues, but I do want to thank DOT. I just want to add my thanks. We're really lucky that Casey is the person working on this project. He has a great way of keeping an eye on this particular intersection, and more projects on the border with CB12, please, so that we can keep Leroy in our loop. Thank you very much for your help on this, Leroy. And to Diana, who's not here, but thanks to her too. I appreciate I'm sorry if this came up before, but I appreciate the interaction you had with the local firehouse to ensure, their passability at this location. I think we all learned something from them on that conversation. Love that. And I just want to thank you. And just to reiterate what you just said, Casey, keep the community board posted on any concerns that you continue to have as this moves forward, because that's how this happened. As Casey just said, when agencies hear from local communities, that's how things done. We're willing to take good news and compliments as well. So if this turns out splendidly, let us know.
If I can say, Sean, because of this particular project and our relationship with the community board and the firehouse, we are now meeting with the firehouse on a more regular basis. The Brooklyn South, for any project we do in a particular area, we're going to be meeting with Brooklyn South Command as well as the local firehouses. Well, that wasn't part of the process before, it is now. So, and that was due to what happened at Cotillion Road and the relationship that you have with the firehouse to get us on board with that. So I have to give you kudos for that. And that's across the board, that's going to be citywide. That the borough commissioner's office will be meeting with the borough commands of the fire department and the local houses on a more regular basis. So thank you for that.
It's always good to see agencies kind of coordinating with each other and sharing information. Appreciate it. All right, so I don't see any other questions on this. I want to thank our presenter, Casey, Leroy, you as well. Just to echo what Shauna said, we all really, really appreciate the work that's gone into this. Very much appreciate it. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair.
Hello, everybody. I can't resist, but we have to thank Sean for lighting a fire under the city agencies. Forgot.
Not a fire where the firehouse is involved. Not a fire, Joel.
So we have our next presenter, and if you can remind me at the end of the meeting, I do want to mention the meeting I attended last week regarding congestion pricing. So at the end of the meeting, but now we have Adam Levine from the Metropolitan Transportation Council to tell us about the next regional transportation plan moving forward 2055. Okay, 30-year plan. Adam, you there?
I am here. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Great.
Thank
All right,
you.
terrific.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for the invitation. We really appreciate the opportunity to present at Community Board 14's Transportation Committee. So my name is Adam Levine. I'm the Executive Director of the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council. I have some information I'm going to share about who we are, because I'm not sure how familiar you are with NIMTEC, and then also what we're doing, why we're here to talk to you. So I hope if I can get this to work properly, you'll let me know if you're seeing this.
Yep.
All right, are you seeing it still?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So moving forward, 2055, as you just mentioned, is our next regional transportation plan. And I'll tell you a little bit about what that means. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about who we are. But first, I guess I have a question for everyone here. And it's rhetorical, of course, but let's see if I can get this to proceed. It's not going to go. There we go. So how did you get here? So, you know, in the old days, in the WebEx days, everyone would perhaps take some kind of a transportation to get to this meeting, but it's a WebEx meeting now. So maybe, you know, my usual introduction of how, you know, of kind of, you know, showing how we connect to everything that you do is not as appropriate for this particular meeting, but I'm going to do it anyway. So I recognize that we're all virtual, but how you might have gotten here, you might have taken the bus, you might have walked, taken the subway, maybe ride share or city bike or Long Island Railroad if you really wanted to, you know, take a little bit of a hike from the Atlantic Terminal. But what that means is that if you used any of those means or modes of transportation, you go anywhere in New York City, Long Island, using the most vibrant interconnected transportation network in the United States. And what we are is a regional council of governments. We're a government agency. We're a New York State agency that's tasked by the federal government with representing New York City, Long Island, Lower Hudson Valley member agencies to serve as a collaborative planning forum. This is so much different from the presentation you just got. You know, that is very much hands-on what we're doing, what's going on right now at Cortellia Road. We are, you know, looking into the future for projects like the Cortellia Road project. So we're a planning forum. We provide technical analysis for our members and for the public. We have a shared regional vision that we try to help our members come around, coalesce around. And we also, of course, are here to try and help our member agencies capture as much federal funding as they possibly can. So who are our members? Our members are, as I've said a couple of times, New York City is represented by New York City Department of Transportation and New York City Department of City Planning. New York State is represented by New York State DOT and the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, MTA. And then the 5 suburban counties are also members. So that's Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, Rockland, and Putnam counties. We also have 7 advisory agencies that I hope you can see at the bottom of the slide that include our federal partners, as well as a couple of other state agencies and New Jersey agencies. So why is NIMTEC? NIMTEC exists because of federal regulations that were passed in the 1960s that required that planning be done in the post, or even, I guess it was actually during the heyday of Robert Moses, but toward the end of his heyday. There was definitely a desire to make sure that there was some kind of a planning process put forward before the federal government was going to invest in transportation projects. And so since the 1960s, there's been some form of a metropolitan planning organization that has been designated for each urbanized area, which an urbanized area is defined as a population more than 50,000. And as you can imagine, we have way more than 50,000 people. So why does NIMTEC do a long-range transportation plan is, again, because of federal regulations that want if federal dollars are going to be spent, the federal government wants to make sure that the member agencies are looking forward and not just dealing with the crisis of the moment, but actually looking. Their planning horizon is 20 years. Our planning horizon is a little bit further than that, so we can give our members a little bit of extra time at that back end to make sure that they can capture as many projects as possible and studies and things along those lines. So we actually are going with this particular plan 30 years out. It includes both long and short range strategies and actions or studies, and we do it at least every 4 years in areas that are non-attainment and maintenance areas, which relates to air quality issues. So the federal plan requirements, as I mentioned, update at least every 4 years, a minimum of 20-year planning horizon, long and short range actions, and considered for financial plan development. I'm trying to compress this because I know we don't have too much time, so I apologize if I do go too fast. You can certainly follow up with me later or tell me to slow down. So the Metropolitan Transportation Planning process is pretty cyclical. We have a regional transportation plan that we're here to talk about right now. Then we have a unified planning work program that actually it defines how our members are going to, what studies they're going to do that are going to feed that transportation plan. Then we have a transportation improvement program, which is available on our website, nimtech.org, that lists all of the projects that have federal funding or some kind of federal involvement in them. There's also a congestion management process that's part of this planning process. And then project planning and implementation is where the pavement or the striping or the bulb outs hit the road. So that's moving forward is the current plan that we've got in place right now that was adopted in 2021 and goes from 2022 to 2050. So when I mention the current plan, that's the current plan. It's moving forward. The one that we're working on right now that I'm going to describe in a bit is moving forward 2055. So we have a shared vision for regional mobility, and I actually have to shrink this just a bit so I can see a little bit better. That is, are the officials that are members of the principals that are members of NIMTech or that lead NIMTech recognize that mobility is crucial to the lives of everyone here. So therefore, we aspire to ensure mobility provided reaches everyone in a sustainable, healthy, and equitable manner, that is invested efficiently, that it ensures our region features well-maintained transportation infrastructure, and that it responds effectively to the challenges of tomorrow. So moving forward 2055, which is the effort that's underway right now, has several shared shared guiding principles. And you can see them, I don't want to read all of them, but you can see considering the needs of all users, considering all modes, supporting multi-agency approaches, engaging the public and stakeholders, etc. And I can certainly make a copy of this presentation available afterwards if you want to get into more detail. Moving forward 2055's vision goals, we're focusing around these 6 vision goals that you see in front of you: safety and security, infrastructure, resiliency, congestion, land use, and equity and accessibility. And what does that mean? I can give you a little bit more detail about what that means. So, well, let me get that in just a little bit. So one of the things that we had to do when we were developing both the current plan, which is in place right now moving forward, and its successor moving forward 2055, is consider the massive transformative changes that have taken place in the last 5 years and are still going on. So of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, the changes in personal mobility, the growth of e-bikes and e-scooters and ride share, the evolution of shared mobility is that same idea. The pace of technological development, when we're talking about artificial intelligence, e-commerce and distribution innovations with all of the micro warehouses and all of the issues that we know that New York City DOT is trying to tackle in terms of freight mobility, distributed manufacturing. Also, climate change is of course huge. The energy transformation that we're working toward, changing demographics and lifestyle work style expectations that involves telecommuting and also changing land use patterns that are always underway. So these are just pulled, well, these are the vision goal statements. So they get a little bit more involved than just those, kind of bulleted titles. So we're seeking to establish, maintain a transportation system for which, as an example, safety and security are maximized for people and goods across all uses and modes. You can go through some of these. Congestion is mitigated through investments in technology. Equity in transportation is advanced and access to opportunities is improved for all communities. So I pulled a couple of these just as examples of how we drill down a little bit further. Vision goals include objectives such as ensuring that investments in transportation assets enhance the safety and security of passengers and freight systems, prioritize safe streets, intersections, railroad crossings, and shared use right-of-ways, etc. And I pulled also this equity and accessibility, which the objectives include improving first and last mile access to transit, improving accessibility to the transportation system for users of all abilities, provide more frequent and reliable transit service, etc. So when we list these as objectives, these are objectives that the member agencies agreed on. That includes the MTA, state DOT, city DOT, city planning. These are what we've coalesced around. So, I'm sorry? Okay, so moving forward 2055, public outreach program. We've been basically out on the road with this regional transportation plan since the fall. We've got some tools and resources that I can share with you right now. We did pop-up events in the fall. We did some online focus groups fall into the winter. We're doing virtual outreach activities now, and then there's going to be a public review period about a year from now, just under a year from now. So the tools and resources involve the website, movingforward2055.org. You can take a look at it. You can see what we've done so far, but I'm going to summarize some of that right now. We did several pop-up events. These are just images from the pop-up events where we asked people some questions about where their priorities were with transportation. The pop-up events were in places like the Fall Festival in Huntington. We were at Bed-Stuy Live in Brooklyn. We were at Concourse Plaza in the Bronx. And we had 400 plus attendees helping to prioritize what was important in terms of those goals that I had mentioned. So you get to see that, for instance, in Bedford-Stuyvesant, 57% of those little dots that people put down were in the area of safety and security. Not surprisingly, I'm sure. Reducing congestion is a concern, but it's less of a concern in some places like the suburban counties. Land use to improve transportation choices is also a high priority for the White Plains area. The Bronx was concerned, as you can see, about safety and security. So these are all helping to inform what our members are going to see and how they're going to try and plan projects that are going to address some of these issues, projects and/or studies. So we've done online focus groups with the specific specializations in environmental justice and coordinated human services. And we've been doing virtual outreach activities that are basically moderated topical forums in the topic areas such as freight, active transportation, human services transportation, pedestrian and bicycle issues. And right now, actually, we've got an alternative energy forum going on as we speak. We've still got 2 upcoming forums. So if anyone that's attending here would like to attend those, you can see on this graphic on the right that we have one on exploring curb and parking management needs. That's going to be next Tuesday, the 11th. And on the 25th, we're going to have smart systems for transportation, which touches on some of those AI and other technology issues. These are just to give you an idea. We had at one point, it's closed now, but when it was open, we had our website was allowing folks to go in there and put very specific issues to try and discuss, what their concerns were, so that we could again put those in front of our members, so that they could let us know whether they're planning to do something in the short term that's actually going to address it with a project, or maybe a longer term that's going to address it with a study, or whether they don't think that it's something that they can address at the moment. So excuse me a moment while I reach for something to drink. So I pulled a couple of these that I thought were interesting earlier. They're not specific to Brooklyn. I wish I had actually gone and taken another look and pulled some of the ones from perhaps if there were any in Community Board 14. But I like the one that's, that somebody said the 79th Street 1 station is too loud when the express trains pass. It's something as quality of life type of issue as, maybe are there any ways that the MTA could maybe put some panels in to make things a little quieter, something along those lines. So, the MTA is going to at some point take a look at that and see if it's something that they can address, or if it's something that they, maybe can put into something of a longer range plan, how they're going to consider it. So also, as you can see, there was another one about micromobility. That one was actually up in the Hudson Valley, like bike and scooter shares. So see, these are some of the anticipated outcomes of this effort. It's just a lot of planning and research initiatives are going to come out of this. There's a lot of data collection we're doing, planning process recommendations and program recommendations. We will recommend a lot of projects, programs, and studies. There are 2 categories of these projects, programs, and studies. They are the ones that are part of the fiscally constrained element, which basically means that the funding is already, we're aware of funding. We're able to program up to that level of funding, as opposed to aspirational or vision projects where the funding isn't really available. So we're going to have to put those out a little bit further into the future until we can figure out exactly how we're going to pay for them. And that's what this talks about. It's balancing those costs with the resources, and of course, making sure that we talk about system preservation as well as enhancement, and of course, operations maintenance, and balancing that with the federal, state, and additional financing strategies. So moving forward, projects in Community Board 14, I did ask the team to pull a few projects together that are in the existing plan to give you a sense for what this might look like. even as there's still time for you to get some input into what projects and studies can be identified. So these are NIMTech member projects in Brooklyn right now. You can see there are, gosh, I don't know, about a dozen, maybe 15 projects here. And I'll zoom in a bit so that you can see a little bit more. Community Board 14. We've got these 3 roadway projects. They're all New York City DOT projects. And then we've got a broader one that involves the MTA's signalization project that touches on Community Board 14, but I don't actually have a little transit. I don't know if I thought there was a transit bubble here somewhere, but I don't see it. So you may be familiar with these projects, the Beverly Road over the MTA, New York City Transit project, or reconstruction. I can actually, the next slide shows a little bit more details on them. Reconstruction of Parkside Avenue and Ocean Avenue Railroad Bridge. I think that one might be a vision project. Let me see if I can back up. I think when I was looking, I'm not sure if that one is actually underway, if that one's a vision project. I'll have to double check. Oh wait, no, that's on the next page. So reconstruction of Parkside Avenue and Ocean Avenue is a $48 million project to rehab the bridge and bring it to state of good repair. Beverly Road over the MTA, Brighton Line, again, another state of good repair project. And then there's the vision element of the reconstruction of Church Avenue Bridge over Brighton Line. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the system-wide signal modernization the MTA is undertaking, which in our current transportation improvement program is funded at a level of about $1.4 billion out of a total that was put forward in 2019 of about $5.5 billion. And you can get more information about that if you visit that very cryptic link at the bottom, so you can see all of these projects. That's why I'll be happy to share this afterwards. And then that opens it up to questions. So we're still underway with this effort. As I mentioned, we've got a topical forum happening right now. We've got a couple more this month. Then we're going to go away for a little while and help make sure that our members take a look at all the comments we've received. And we'll come back in the spring for another round of public outreach to gather comments from the draft plan that we put together. And the plan is expected to be adopted in September of 2025. So with that, I did have a video that I could potentially share, but I'm not sure we have time for it. If we do, we'll see if I can share this. I don't know if anybody, can you see? I don't know if you can see this. Is it playing right now? Or are you seeing nothing?
White screen.
You're not seeing it?
No.
Then I will fix that. Let's see if I can stop sharing and then reshare Google Chrome. And hopefully you're seeing it now.
Yes.
Okay.
There is no audio though, if there was intended for audio.
Oh, well, if there's no audio, then I'll stop doing this.
No problem. Thank you though.
Apologies for that. I should have practiced that a little bit more, and now it's
Don't
still
worry,
playing in
Adam,
my
you
ears.
can
So
also send it to us with this presentation. We put these links on our website, so we can link the
Great.
video to the presentation so people can take a look at it when they review the presentation.
that'd be great. It's pretty much just, you know, a prettier version of what I just presented to you. So
Awesome.
you can look at it in your spare time. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Joel, you're on mute. I am happy to just call on people while you kind of get that. So why don't we, Sean, why don't you kick it off?
Thanks. I'm wondering if the road bridge projects that are in that capital plan, the Parkside and the church visioning, those aren't fully funded yet.
Our understanding is that they are fully funded. If they're showing up on our transportation improvement program with those dollar values, that typically means that the agencies have dedicated that funding to advance them. I could get more details and share those with you later, but they are on our website.
Okay, great. I'll follow up with you on timelines on those too. And I'm wondering if you know whether or not the Newkirk Avenue Road Bridge is on the horizon.
I don't, but as I did mention, we're in the process actually of gathering information. I didn't actually go into detail on this, but we're in the process of gathering information from the agencies right now. That's going to be, because the current plan that we're in goes up to 2027. So it's got the next couple of years. So if it's a little bit further out, maybe 28, 29, 30, it may be in their schedule, but not yet in our system. And that's something that we'll know over the coming months.
Cool. That will come from DOT's Bridges Division?
Well, I mean, our contact is dedicated to our being our liaison, but I'm sure it'll come through the bridge office. Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
So can you hear me now?
I hear you. Great.
Oh, okay, great. I'm sorry, I had to re-sign in. So this is very fascinating. You know, we're used to hearing presentations from people who are involved in, you know, projects like our last presenter, things that are happening now. This is, you know, sort of a different view, a little wider view. The projects that you listed in our district, those struck me as projects that would have been generated by government agencies, be it DOT or wherever. But then you mentioned that you had in your surveys that people, you know, the person that wanted the train station to be less loud. So how are your projects generated? I mean, we heard all the different parameters and all the goals and aspirations. You know, how you know, where do you get your projects from?
Yeah, part of it is going to be based on, you know, making sure that things stay in a state of good repair. So you may be aware of the MTA recently released I think it was like a 20-year needs study that talked about, you know, what they need to do right now and what they see as the needs over the next 20 years. And some of that was, you know, they had identified funding for. Some of it they were still trying to identify. I think IBX, the Interborough Expressway, is on a project that's in that study and is coming through our agency actually over the next couple of weeks, so that it lands on our transportation improvement program and eventually moves forward as a capital project. Well, first as an environmental study, then a capital project. So so that is something that the agencies sometimes will identify on their own. But as I showed, there were, gosh, nearly 3,000 comments that we got from the public. There were, you know, those 400 comments that we got from people that were attending our pop-up events. We're getting many comments from our topical forums, and, you know, we'll take whatever comments you guys have. If you have any particular transportation issues that you want to share, you're welcome to share them with me. You can send a letter, and, you know, we can make sure to put that in front of our members. But then that's how each of those points that I showed on the map, our members are doing their best. I mean, it's 3,000 points, and, you know, the staff that's taking a look at it is you know, not huge. But they're doing their best to go through each one of those points and to see, you know, whether that's something that they're going to be able to accommodate in terms of a study or a project, or it's something that they're going to need to, you know, take a little bit more time and a little bit more resources to get back to. So there is an impact that this outreach effort has. So if there are particular questions or issues that you'd like us to put in front of the members, you'll have that opportunity.
Thank you. I see Jeffrey, you got your hand up.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the presentation. You were mentioning sort of last mile freight and so forth, and thinking about 2055, I'm curious if you have thoughts or guesses. What is the state of, you know, freight transportation going to look like, deliveries, et cetera? Are we going to see larger trucks? Are we going to see smaller trucks? Are we going to see more, you know, cargo bike sort of things? Where is this going? What is sort of the long-term strategic plan to support probably significantly increased deliveries in 2055?
Yeah, we're still identifying a lot of those answers, but I don't know if you've had the folks from New York City DOT's freight office come and give a presentation, but they are doing some really innovative work. The cargo bikes, you know, was something that I know you just mentioned. You know, some of those, I guess, kind of locker storage areas that they're trying to, you know, maybe consider along the curbside, or, you know, just ways to try and minimize the footprint of freight deliveries, so that, you know, you're not dealing with 55-foot trucks going everywhere, or the huge Amazon trucks going everywhere, or whatever. But it is a challenge. So, I mean, you know, 30 years from now, whether, you know, there are going to be drones delivering things in places, it's a little challenging to say. But we are seeing, I think I saw an article recently that that Amazon was approved for a drone delivery test in some part of the country. I'm not sure where, by the FAA. But that's, I should point out that once it leaves the ground, it's not our responsibility. We're ground transportation only. So if that happens, it's going to be somebody else's issue to address. But yeah, that is what we're seeing at the moment, and that's what we're projecting. We're trying to see a lot of those, as you mentioned, the first mile and last mile issues are huge, because that's where a lot of the transportation issues are coming from, is, right in people's neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Steve, you have your hand up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. I I was actually originally going to ask a question about future drones, so I'll pivot to another question. And I'll pivot to another
Sorry.
question that I had in mind. No. I'm glad Jeffrey opened that door. From all I've heard, and I don't know if this has changed recently, but since the pandemic, subway and bus ridership seems like it hasn't come back to the numbers beforehand, presumably at least in part due to more commonality of work from home arrangements, things like that. Perhaps, to some degree, some concerns about safety, but at least from what I can tell, mostly because of changes in habits in terms of work from home sort of things. So I'm just curious, from a long-term planning perspective, do we have a feel like, now that we're a few more years or a little more time removed, like, do we think those numbers are going to come back to pre-pandemic levels? Do we think some traffic patterns are changed entirely? And in terms of, like, just in terms of, are certain regions impacted differently? I'd just be curious to see what thoughts are with regard to that issue. Thank you.
Well, yeah, well, I mean, that's a huge issue, and it's something that we are trying to consider with our plan. We're testing a couple of scenarios in terms of, telecommute percentages, based on the numbers that we're seeing now and the numbers that we're perhaps projecting into the future. But telecommuting isn't necessarily going to change all transit needs, because where folks may not be using space for offices, there's been so much talk about converting some of those offices into residential units. And then folks are going to need to get back and forth from where they live now, and these business districts into wherever they want to go. And they might just change the time of day that they're moving. Maybe it's not a morning and evening peak as much as it is. We saw certainly during the height of COVID those peaks were lower, but they were extended because people were trying to avoid some of those crowding issues on the subways. That's not as much of an issue now. So I mean, I can tell you from my personal experience, commuting back and forth to our office in Lower Manhattan, that those subways are pretty crowded now. They may not be what they were, but sometimes they are. We are, doing our best to try to consider those issues. It is a bit of a challenge, but the numbers are showing a lot of growth. We published something called a hub bound report. This isn't specific to Brooklyn. This is specific to Manhattan, but it's basically, how many people are coming into the portion of Manhattan that's 60th Street and lower, and by whatever mode. And those numbers, were in the 30% a couple of years ago. They were in the 50s last year or so, maybe 2023. Where are we at 2024 right now? Sorry. So 2021 was in the 30s, 2022 was in 50s, 2023 was in the 60s to 70s. I mean, it's come back quite a bit. It's still not there. And it's going to take quite a while. But we also have, I took out a slide that talked a little bit about the forecasting work that we're doing in terms of population and employment. But those numbers are expected to go up. We are still expecting to grow as a region. And so, the existing network is going to, have needs and will eventually, perhaps, we hope, need some kind of either improvements in terms of capacity or maybe in terms of efficiency to be able to move people better.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Any questions for Adam? Good segue though for 60th Street. Last week I attended a presentation on the congestion pricing, and I wanted to make sure, Sean, that we have a link to that up on the website.
Oh, before we do that, I have my hand raised.
I'm sorry, Elizabeth. Go ahead.
Okay, no problem. I know it's hard to see on WebEx sometimes. I just had one question. You kind of mentioned about how peaks had changed and so forth. My understanding is that some other cities, including like Washington DC, had done a lot more to make off-peak travel a lot more prevalent. And as like having done a little bit of research on how it work from home, or people with more flexible schedules who maybe haven't been served as well by New York's transportation system, which had been largely job oriented for so long, tend to take more trips on off hours. And we haven't really had as much of a surge of increased off-hour service or off-peak service and so forth. And was just wondering if there was any additional information that maybe your organization had any thoughts on that or so forth. You know, I don't have answers. I just have, you know, seen some different information, different places, and just was wondering because, you know, I think there is a lot, you know, as I've transitioned to working from home, I know that I take actually more trips, but they're just at different times and they're to very different places than, you know, kind of going right into work and then coming home each day.
Well, that's a really good question. I unfortunately can't speak for the MTA. That's something that I know that they work on, but I don't know where they are in terms of making any of those kinds of adjustments. They have very detailed information about what time people are, you know, clocking in and clocking out through those turnstiles. So, and they do make adjustments as I've heard. But I don't know if they've done anything kind of en masse to try to, you know, they might be smaller tweaks. But it's a great question that I'd be happy to take back to our representative and see if they can get us any information that I can share with you.
Thank you so much. And sorry for making sure to interrupt the congestion pricing next conversation. Thanks so much for letting me get my question over to Adam.
Thank you. I'm just afraid I'll forget it, you know. So anyway, so thank you very much, Adam. I don't think we have any more questions.
Thank you.
It was a great presentation, and it was really eye-opening, you know, that what you do is going on, you know, in the background. So maybe Adam left us already. If you can hear me, Adam, thank you again.
I'm still here, but I'm actually planning to jump off if it's okay. So thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
it's okay. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
So just one last thing, Sean. Is that presentation, do we have a link to that on the website? To that congestion pricing program? You there, Sean?
I'm having trouble
Okay.
hearing you. It is all on our website.
Yeah, because I think it's, you know, it was very concise and very informative, because, you know, it's happening at the end of this month and people should know how it's going to operate.
Yeah, it's on the front page of the website. It won't be hard to find.
Okay.
But I'm
good.
sorry, I can't drop it in here, but
I'm gonna send it out to my neighborhood association.
there, Liz just did.
There it is,
you
Liz.
go.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
So, all right, everybody. That was a very interesting meeting. You know, the details of Cortelli Road and then the big vision. So thank you all for coming, and see you next week at our regular meeting.
No, Joe,
Nope.
no.
I'm
So,
sorry.
our regular monthly meeting will be held on the 17th,
I'm
1
sorry.
week later than usual. Next
right.
week, though, on Tuesday, the 11th, is the public hearing on the City of Yes for housing opportunity. That will also be an in-person meeting at the district office, 810 East 16th Street. Also, all of that is on our website. But yeah, hope to see you in person 2 weeks in a row.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, Musa.
You're welcome.
Good night.